Welcome Kristina Halvorson. I want to do an intro, and I feel like it's going to come up short because she's just been the voice of our community for so long and has, really impacted my career and probably a lot of people here, whether it's been through Confab, the conference, her book, which I've already heard someone mention that they purchased just in case they couldn't make it tonight, the content strategy for the web. Also, she's the host of practically named Content Strategy podcast, and of course CEO of Brain Traffic, and speaking the world over. So we're very glad to have her tonight. Everybody, give a warm welcome to Kristina Halvorson.
My hope is that my face will remain on the screen the entire time I've been here. Can we kill that? I mean, not live. Okay, yeah, okay.
It's getting disconnected.
It's getting disconnected. That's for this. Okay. Good, because I was really worried people were going to be like, hi! Hi! Can we please clap for the people that stood up to say that they were looking for jobs? That takes guts! I got a little teary. I cry at everything right now. Old. Oh, I can't see you if I do that. I guess I'm going to be standing up for an hour. Thank you so much for having me. I'm here with my cohort, Tanessa Gemelke, who is the Captain Confab, soon to be Captain Button as well. And she and I both agree that this is our favorite meetup. Do not tell anyone else that I said that.
In the whole country?
Top 3. Don't tell anybody. Yeah, it's real. I mean, that was Nicole said. She was like, every time we get together, it's like a reunion. I mean, that's amazing. There are a lot of content strategy meetups who kind of were really hot in like the mid 2000s. It's all. Look at all these choices I have. I feel like Goldilocks. This is awesome.
This is just right.
This is just right. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's to be, that you're still keeping it going and this active and this many people are coming out, and I don't know, it's just great. It's good energy in the room. So, yay. Good work, team. Okay, this is when I come out to do meetups, I typically just do AMAs. Because I am lazy and don't want to put together more talks. It's more fun anyway because I get to hear from you all and find out what's on your minds. Sometimes I make you talk instead of me. Aren't you glad you're sitting in the front row? I'm like a comedian. Did you know that? Crowd work. Not really, as far as you know. So I don't know, did we take questions or are we just gonna shoot from the hip here?
Shoot from the hip.
All right. Who wants to go first? Oh, this is going to be great. Yeah, go ahead.
What inspired you to start Button?
Oh, we are so excited for Button. So Button is our new conference, and it's going to happen in Seattle, as long as Seattle is still standing in October. Half of us laugh, half of us don't. So it's going to happen on October 19th through the 21st, and it is specifically about content strategy and design and writing for products. So the reason that we are hosting Button, we actually have been talking about doing this particular conference for a couple of years, but the reason that we're hosting it is that Confab, how many of you have attended Confab before? Aw, thanks. So Confab is a content strategy conference that we founded in 2011, and it really has, at the time it was really very much focused on websites, because when I wrote content strategy for the web, it's mostly about websites, because mobile was still kind of a what's going on. But of course, over the years, content strategy as a thing, and I'm sure this will come up, has become this huge unwieldy field / practice / world discipline thing. And we are definitely seeing different areas of specialty those folks kind of find and build communities. one such community is in the UX and content Slack workspace. Anybody here belong to that? Okay, a few of you. So this was started by Michael Metz, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and it was just like, hey, let's talk about UX and content, and there were like 40 of us, and now there are 6,000. And so between that and all of the fantastic writing that we are seeing, largely coming out of the product companies, I will say, on the West Coast, we were just like, this is a community that needs a home the way that Confab has been a home to content strategists for the last 9-10 years. And so that's the opportunity that we saw. And we announced it on I tweeted about it, Brain Traffic tweeted about it, and I posted it on LinkedIn. And almost overnight, we had 1,500 email signups, and we received 180 talk submissions. So this is just unheard of for a first-time conference in this industry. So we are thrilled and delighted and cannot wait to help shape that conversation. So, yeah. And you should all come. It's gonna be great. Who's next? I saw you raise your hand. Hi.
Hi. I really struggle with describing what content strategy is.
Oh, here we go.
Describe content strategy.
What do you all think? Okay, so I have lost a lot of sleep over this. Some people lose sleep over, like, I don't know, their financial future or world peace. And now for me, it's like, what is content strategy? So when I wrote content strategy for the web, these many years ago, I wrote it, actually somebody I just did an interview where somebody was like, why did you write that book? And it took me back. And I really, when I wrote it, it was really like, nobody has written this book and somebody has to, because we've got to start talking about content, because this is ridiculous. Content is like what makes or breaks the user experience. How is this not all that anyone is talking about all the time? So I really was like, I'm gonna write this book. I'm gonna make it red so it looks important. I'm gonna kind of put some basic stuff in there that content strategists, mostly know. I mean, it's nothing huge, groundbreaking processes or tools, right? I mean, but it really, I think, sort of like pulled together, what I'm proud of is that it pulled together the story for content strategy, right? Like it made the business case. And so that was great for websites. And now we have all the things. And so, also content marketing. And so over the last 10, 11 years then, content has become just sort of this like, it's like the plastic island in the ocean. It's just like swirling and becoming bigger and bigger and messier. And I realize I'm getting to the answer, just hold on. And so, but another question that they asked was, in this interview was, are there any assumptions that you made when you wrote the book that have not come true? And my assumption was, yeah, I figured in 10 years we wouldn't have to be having this conversation anymore, right? And so, but I think that the reason that the conversation persists is, well, it's for multiple reasons, but part of it is that we are having trouble pinning our finger on what is content strategy, the thing. And what I have really come to believe is that content strategy as like the one and only definition probably does not exist. And it probably cannot exist. So the one that I threw out there in my book was content strategy guides planning for the creation, delivery, and governance of useful, usable content. So it was like, there's thinking, there's analysis, there is process, and once you get it out there, there's the care and feeding of your content, right? That sort of points to the content life cycle versus just content strategy is write some copy, throw it over the wall, get it online, and boom, strategy. I feel that when I talk about content strategy now, it's almost easier for me to talk about like the world of content, which is a little bit of a cop-out, but I will tell you where I see. I think that definition in many ways, when you're first introducing it into a conversation, still holds up. I don't think it's wrong, right? In many ways, though, what I've started to do is kind of talk about like the world of content, and what I see is that it's sort of, I don't know, coalescing, not splintering. Like there are different areas of expertise and specialties that are developing, and these are the 4 that I see, and I'd actually be really interested in other people's perspective on this. Content design, or content within the user experience. I'm hearing the words content experience used a lot, and that I'm not quite there yet with that. And just, it's not an experience, it's just content that makes sense in context. But really people who are, and that's where I came up, right, was content in the user experience. So folks that are working in design and building things, basically. Then I see, obviously, content marketing, which I spent many years hating on content marketing until finally somebody was like, you do content marketing for brain traffic, and I was just like, oh, damn it, it's a thing. I feel like a lot of that hype is kind of shaking out. I think that the gross peakness of content marketing has sort of passed us, and that we are really sort of seeing people who are implementing smart content marketing strategies as like programs that you can take care of and that are meaningful and you can blah, 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 blah. So you see sort of the marketing content. And then what I really wish this would catch on, this sort of practice of content engineering, which the team at Simple A and Joe Goldner and Anne Rockley really and Scott Abel have kind of been talking about in Ozarbeena for many, many years, which is really sort of getting into the architecture of content and the modeling and taxonomies and helping create and build the machines to make it go. So really, truly engineering the experience of content. Oh, I said it again. And then sort of underpinning all of that is content operations, which gather content is a, it's kind of a word, it's content workflow tool. Really doubled down on sort of helping to kind of define that conversation and to help shape it. Rahel Bailey is also really working in that. One thing that I have really seen is that you thought this was just going to be a sentence. No, that's not how it works. One thing that I have really seen is that, and I wonder if others have seen this too, that like, UX kind of burst onto the scene in like 1998, 1999. And then content strategy, that tipping point was right around that 2008, 9, 10. And I see that content as a sort of practice is still lagging about 5-6 years behind UX. And so in that sense, you're seeing now sort of the rise of design ops. I think that we will see something similar around content ops in a couple of years. So content strategy, no easy answer. The bottom line is that content strategy means making intentional choices about content that is going to best serve your user needs and help your ultimate kind of business goals. And like if your content doesn't do that, then what's the point? And however you need to like phrase that or talk about it or map it to the work that leadership is doing within your organization, do it. Yeah. Yes.
So on that note, I work in an organization where content strategy has only been a role for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I struggle with selling the need to include a content strategist in your project for work that has traditionally been done by a digital strategist or a UX designer. How do you convince people who are like, well, I could do it cheaper without you, to include content strategists in their projects?
This is the #1 question I get asked. I have been asked this question probably 1,000 times, like actually literally 1,000 times. And again, my assumption 10 years ago was that we wouldn't have to be asking this question. So kudos to you for wanting to have and lead that conversation within your organization. Thank you very much. I still am just like, why? Why hasn't leadership gotten it? So when people ask, okay, what I have seen is that organizations live along a continuum of content operational maturity. And many, many years ago, Rahel Bailey, again, put together a content strategy maturity model. And I'm sure that you have all seen some version of a maturity model, whether it's content marketing maturity, content engineering maturity, whatever. But hers is so simple and straightforward that I sort of refer back to it all the time and wish that maybe I could just change a word or two and then call it brain traffic. But you know, the first couple of, it's 5 stages all the way from, I think it's reactive, it might be the first one, all the way through to strategic. And reactive is where you are just like, content, it's the words, let's write it in a document and put it on the internet, right? Because there's so much space, we can do all that we want. And then tactical is like, okay, we need to start making plans about our content. And then moving from tactical into managed is where I find beginning to make the case for, hey, content requires some unique oversight in a way, and like some dedicated resources beyond the writing, right? Who is answering to the project manager, who is holding all the information about the research and the UX and the everything else that the content person actually really needs. So what I have found is that when you live kind of in that reactive tactical moving into managed, sort of a managed environment, trying to have a conversation around content strategy as a thing is pretty pointless because nobody cares. Because content strategy sounds really expensive, right? And so what I typically recommend is to identify that role that you see is required or that is going to make these projects better, which you know as content strategists, right? But then try to find ways to introduce that person into the conversation as early as possible. Because what will happen is that the sooner we can bring that person into the conversation around whatever product you're making or project you're implementing or process that you're trying to shift or change or transform or whatever, they're going to be asking questions through a content lens that other people are not asking. And that, frankly, is where the light bulb begins to go off. And so that's the first tactic. Is don't call them a content strategist. You can call them the writer, call them the business analyst, like I don't care what you call them, but bring it in there and make sure that they are asking questions through that unique content lens, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is really straightforward, but I see it work all the time. When you're in that sort of period of maturity, it's really necessary that leadership starts to get it. Because if leadership doesn't get it, you're never gonna move forward. If leadership is not like, oh, content, valuable and complicated, you're never gonna move. And so really the way to do that is to begin to figure out how to connect where the content pain points are and how that's causing pain or serving as an obstacle to whatever sort of the next couple of levels up their goals are and what they're being measured on. So whatever sort of friction you can find or things that are falling apart or opportunities to, that this would have been cost saving or it would have saved time or this would have improved, we wouldn't have had to go back and fix it. That's the kind of thing to bring back up to management to say, this happened because of this versus starting with, what would be a great idea is if we introduce this thing into the process. Does that make sense? So that you're actually starting with here, because what people don't care about is the right way to do things. They don't care. They don't care. Oh, is it right for the user? Up here, they usually, I shouldn't say that. There are some companies, and you know who they are because you love their products, who really are user-centered, right? But a lot of times, they're just paying lip service to it. And in that instance, you usually see that content is just sort of like an afterthought. So, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Yes?
Me?
You!
Okay. What? I don't know if you answered this question already or not.
Why, weren't you listening to me?
I have a friend that's in dire need. Anyway, I don't want to put a what was my question? Oh, my question.
I don't know, but I have questions, but go ahead.
My question is, I don't know if you answered it already or not, but I don't understand the difference between a content strategist and content, or I don't understand the difference between content strategy and content marketing. Unless you answered that question already, in which case.
I haven't answered that question already, and I would love to answer that question. Thank you very much. Okay, so.
Did you understand my question?
Oh, I understood your question. Yeah, no, it's good. What's the difference between content strategy and content marketing?
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So what you're saying is you don't want me to go on and on.
We did myself. Why you put me in the system?
You're my favorite person here.
That was my question, yes. To
Okay.
answer your question, yes, that was my question.
Okay, one of us should stop talking. Okay, so one thing that has I'm gonna talk. One thing that has made me insane, I don't know if any of you follow me on Twitter, I've really chilled out in my old age, but wow, for many years I was real mad, was how content marketing really has co-opted the phrase content strategy. Like, oh, we're gonna decide what kind of content we're gonna publish and make an editorial calendar, and that's our content strategy. This, my friends, is not a content strategy. That is an editorial plan. I have myself created content marketing strategies for organizations that then I hand to them and say, now go make your plan, because I'm not interested. So, but that's not true. I love content marketing. But so when I talk about the strategy piece with content next to strategy, what I am talking about is threefold. One, you have to make a clear diagnosis of where your challenges and opportunities are when it comes to content, right? Without doing kind of that situational analysis and diagnosis, you cannot do strategy. Because otherwise strategy is like, let's pick a few places that we want to go. And those are really great ideas. But a smart strategy is very, very clearly informed by that research and analysis. And I cannot talk about strategy without talking about that. With content marketing, a lot of the times, what happens is marketers are tasked with creating content largely to attract and acquire customers or leads. Right. So, and it's very, very early along the customer lifecycle, right? However, part of that content marketing has to be not just deciding what you're going to do, but then how you're going to promote it. What I see a lot in content marketing is people saying, okay, who are we trying to reach? What do we think they might be interested in? What channels are we going to reach them on? Let's go do it. And let's do a lot of it and see what works. And I rarely see strategy that is informed by that analysis, business goals, known audience needs and preferences and expectations and desires, and sort of a core statement that is providing constraints. So when you talk about content marketing as a thing, what you were talking about is content and the distribution of that content and the promotion of that content. When you add strategy to it, you're adding the purpose piece of it, right? So, and going back to what is content strategy, I think content strategy encompasses a lot of different things. And I think that content marketing can be a part of content strategy, but then it becomes more of like a tactical initiative.
That was my first question.
Oh yeah, see? You like it when I talk. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
My second, is journalism and content marketing the same thing?
Oh, no.
No?
No. Wow. So content marketing, okay. So I think that many of the skills that journalists bring to the table in terms of writing and storytelling and researching and so on can be used to create content that then can be used within a content marketing program, right? But with content marketing, again, you're creating content specifically to help attract and engage and hopefully like pull people into your web of sales and marketing ecosystem, right? Journalism is what is journalism?
Storytelling.
Storytelling. That's part of journalism. Yes, part of journalism is
Keeping those
storytelling.
informed.
Sorry?
Keeping people informed.
Keeping people informed. Correct.
What's happening.
Of what's happening.
That's what we like.
That's what we would like it to be. That is correct.
Make
Yes.
their money with advertising.
Sorry?
Journalists, newspapers and magazines and news shows, they make their money with paid advertising.
That is correct. They used to. All right, now somebody asks a cheerful question. Yes. No. Your level. What's your name?
Chino.
Chino. It's nice to meet you. And Kristina. Thanks. Let's high five after, okay? Okay. Hi.
I don't know if this qualifies as cheerful, it's more of an existential crush.
Oh, existential. You know what? If ever there were a time to kick into existential content strategy, now is it.
Okay.
Let's go.
So I love the breakdown of like content design, content engineering, and ops, and I wonder, thinking about like for an individual planning career, like I have often thought maybe I should lean into one of those, like
Sure.
maybe I should lean into one and be like, call myself an information architect, or lean into the ops and call myself a service designer. So I wonder if you have any advice about like, how do you carve a place for yourself in this like garbage plastic that we
I
have.
can't believe I described content strategy as Plastic Island. I surprise even myself after all these years. Okay, so the question was, with all the things, how do you start to carve out a role for yourself? or in your career, how you start to make decisions. And what I would say is it really depends on the kind of company you want to work for, right? There are giant companies who have content strategists that are specifically assigned to one feature set within a product, and that is their role, right? I would call it a content designer, but let's not, whatever. But that's their role. There are other companies who have a content designer or content strategist who is available to 7 different product teams. So that's a kind of a job, right? There are companies of 12 people where the content strategist is determining content, doing research and determining content requirements for the website. They are writing email copy. They are looking at analytics. They are doing user testing, and they're doing all the things. And they're a generalist, right? So it depends. I mean, for me, it's like, what kind of a job do I want to walk into in the morning? And if I want a thing that I can dig into really, really, really deeply, then one of 2 things: go work for a big company, or go work for an agency or a consulting firm that very narrowly focuses on those kinds of services. But there are, I mean, everything from like, be the content person and do all the things, to, you know, here's your corner of the CMS, make this work and teach everybody else how it works, you know, from like a standards and governance standpoint, and make sure that they're in compliance. I mean, you can do whatever you want. So, but again, you want to think about the kind of work that you want to do, but you also need to balance that with the kind of workplace you want to go into every day and the kind of team that you want to work with. Does that help? Yeah, jobs are hard. Yeah.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, and I was thinking about it when you were talking about just the different divisions, like with engineering and operations. I keep finding jobs because I do contract work and freelance work, and I keep getting migration work, which seems to be...
Oh, migration work. She's
yeah.
a contractor, she gets migration work. Yeah.
And I actually do enjoy it, but like,
yeah.
to your point, it's like that's a bit of a one and done project. I mean, like, you could be there for a while if they need governance help and things, but a part of me, I'm like, okay, great, I'm becoming an expert in something, but I'm also like, I need to eat regularly. So like,
right.
So like, how do you market something like that, or is that too niche to maintain an ongoing career with? Like, should it be partnered with something else?
No, I mean, I guess, so the question is being like a content migration specialist or expert or overseeing those, is that too niche? And what I would suggest is right now, no, because leadership still thinks that their content problems can be solved by new technology, right? And they also think that it's okay to do mostly a lift and shift because they'll clean the content up later. Lift and shift. I'm sorry. I want to hug you. I'm sorry. Yeah, but that, you know, no matter, I mean, our best intentions, it always happens. It always happens. And of course, at Brain Traffic, what we want to do is, yes, and then we're going to put together governance plans. We're going to put together this like 9-month plan. We're going to put everybody, you know, we're going to assign stuff, and we're going to have standards. And like the couple of times we've tried those projects, they're like, yeah. No. And so we don't do those ever. But it's a very, very necessary skill. And I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. What I would really encourage you to do is to really keep an eye on the CMS industry as a whole, and to kind of like continue to do a lot of reading around trends and see like where are people hosting their content, you know, because that's what's going to put you out of business, is when suddenly either the technology changes or priorities change, or people are like, oh, what we actually need is like 2% of the content that we have, and so we're going to spend 2 years getting rid of all of it and then focus on this one. Like, because that, you know, things will change. So that, I think it's a great, if you enjoy the work, then I think it is a great area of specialty, and I think that like, shout it loud, shout it clear. But yeah, does that help?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I just think that this is where, I mean, as the owner of Brain Traffic, like trying to keep track of, and also frankly, in 2010, I literally knew every single content strategist that existed. Like we all knew each other, and there were all 30 of us we're on Twitter together or whatever, you know, and trying to stay on top of all of the ways in which things are evolving because there's so many more of us involved now in doing work and doing smart thinking and pushing things forward and pushing our companies forward, stuff changes. And so just that's my number one piece of advice to you is just like really dig in and know what is happening within that area of your industry to stay in front of it. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
To piggyback off her.
See, you are just like a web of. It's great.
As I said earlier, I'm a career transitioner, and I have noticed that I really enjoy UX research and also content strategy. And I had a chance to speak with other content strategists and other people in the industry and stuff like that. And I've noticed there's a lot of overlap in regards to research and content, right? And so when I applied, actually this recently happened. I was going for a UX research position, but they said that they got back to me and they said that basically they said we thought your skills were more suited toward content strategy, which is fine. So I'm wondering, I'm like, should I? Is it like is developing a niche with both useless, or should I still do that, or should I just pick one or the other? If that makes any sense, I hope I.
So I would go back to, what do you want to be building? What kinds of problems do you want to be solving? What kinds of organizations do you want to be working with that, you know, who are trying to create what change or put stuff out into the world? Like, because if you can start to answer those questions, I mean, if you are equally passionate about UX research and content strategy, then you're an amazing content strategist, right? Like any content strategist that does not care about user research or UX research, like what are you doing, right? And it's great that you have both skills. And if you're equally passionate about both of them, what I would suggest is that you consider looking at working on a product team and maybe pitching yourself as a content designer, for example. Because that is, well, at least in the UK, research is a big part of what content designers do. I don't think you have to like double down on one or the other unless you really want to. And in that instance, just lead with that in the interview. Lead with that. I mean, you rewrite your. We can't do that anymore because of LinkedIn. I haven't read. I was like, you rewrite your resume for every single position, right? But that was 20 years ago. Darn. But yeah, just lead with that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah.
I'm really new to this field. Actually, I don't know anything about it. I'm a software implementation person, and it seems like hearing from you, there's a lot of vocabulary that's not standardized, where it leads to confusion on what jobs are and what jobs can be or should be. Is there a resource you would recommend someone like me, who's a novice, who doesn't know anything, to really understand what life cycle means for you, what workflow means for you? Because for me, it means something completely different.
Correct.
In a regulatory standpoint for like pharmaceutical manufacturing. So I would like to get insight on podcasts or books.
Yep. So would I. I wish that authoritative text exists. And in fact, I am in a very weird position in that I am under a lot of pressure from a lot of people to write that text. You will notice I have not written it yet. I mean, the short answer is no. Good luck. I think that, so what I would say, I'll tell you what I'm reading right now.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I'm reading right now. I'm paying really close attention to the stuff that is coming out of the writing teams at, the product teams at Adobe and Atlassian and Shopify, damn it, and Airbnb, and they're all writing really, really stellar stuff specifically around product content strategy. Go ahead.
And you mean like blogs of theirs? Like what?
Yes, yeah. There's a book called Content Design that you might find really interesting, but that is, the first edition is really around process. I think she's writing a second edition to talk more about it as like a field of practice. I will tell you, to give myself a shout out, The Content Strategy podcast is and it is really creatively or / pragmatically named. I use that as an excuse to stay on top of stuff myself. And you can hear it when I'm actually interviewing people, because most of the time I'm just like, that is blowing my mind, and that's pretty much all I say. And so that is, but when in terms of like really aligning on lexicon, I don't see it happening. Cool. And the reason I don't see it happening is that there are so many different companies are at so many different stages of organizational, of content maturity in terms of their operations. Organizations are in so many different stages of how much they actually care about the customer and the end user. They're in so many different places in terms of how well or how poorly teams collaborate across the organization. Frankly, this is one of the very first things that we do at Brain Topic when we walk into a consulting engagement, is we're like, hi, okay, let's agree that when we say workflow, this is what we're talking about. When we say content strategy, this is what we're talking about. When we say content we align on lexicon, we have clarity of concept. And that right now I think is kind of the best that we can do. I really wish I could better answer that question. I have so many questions. In the back. Yep. So I think that my successful stories of waltzing in and talking to a CMO or a CEO about how important content strategy is, when they didn't get it a minute ago, and then suddenly they get it and they're like, yes, I'm changing the organization the way that a CEO will read a book on Agile, when they get on the plane in New York, and by the time they get to San Francisco, they're like, we're going Agile! It's not funny. I think that is probably 4 to 5 years out. And actually the next book I write is going to be specifically geared towards leadership, going, hello, this is complicated, and if you don't figure it out, you're never going to compete in customer experience. Have we had successes? Yes. The biggest success we had recently was when we were in for a 2-day, it was an alignment workshop, where they were starting this giant all-enterprise website redesign / we're going to get rid of 200 URLs and bring it all under our primary brand URL. And there were 30 people in the room, and the chief marketing officer walked in and sat down, and everybody was like, oh my God, she's here. And she kind of went blah, 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 content marketing, blah, blah, blah. And then we started kind of writing out okay, well, here are all the considerations that we need to make as we're starting to think about this website. And she stayed for the whole 2 days because she was basically just like, oh my God, I had no idea that this was a thing. She just had no clue that that's how complicated it was, and that content was something that everybody across the organization had an impact on the end product, right? And how it was managed. So then she called us in, and she was like, we really want you to be on board for this project. And then she left because the average tenure of a CMO is 42 months. So that is also real, and it's not funny. But yeah, so I think it's going to be a while. I just think it's going to be a couple more years. And we also recently had an experience where the senior vice president of a Fortune 50 company, a senior vice president of digital experience, was like, we're going to redo this website, and we're going to redo it right, and we are going to call in Brain Traffic, and they are going to be there in the room from the very, very, very beginning. And we went in and we gave them this proposal about, UX research and situation analysis and alignment and this and this and this, and he handed it to the CMO and was like, this is amazing, we can't wait to work with the CMO. Was like, why can't the agency just do that? My big fancy creative agency that is going to make my user-centered website all about storytelling for healthcare products. Yeah, so that was depressing. But we persist, we carry on. Yes?
crisis.
You are not having an existential life crisis. That is not what she's having. I'm sorry.
That's what she categorized it as. So you were mentioning analytics, and I was wondering, like, do you feel that SEO falls into the realm of content strategy? Is there blurry lines there? Like, where do you stand on that?
Yep, so the question is, where do I stand in terms of, does SEO fall into the like world of content strategy? And what I would say is that I think that a content strategist who is focused on creating, or who is working with a team or themselves creating content requirements, if they are not in close touch with the SEO folks, they're missing a huge opportunity, especially if you're doing user research and you're not paying attention to what's going on with your internal search, right? That to me is just like, Lou Rosenfeld wrote a great book about that, that's just like forehead slapping, why are we not paying attention to this? So do I think that like SEO should sit within content strategy? Probably not. I mean, that SEO is, because there's two sides of that coin, right? There's like getting visibility and marketing, and then there's also the usability and helping people find what they're looking for. And so depending on where content strategy sits within your organization, I think that you're gonna be working with that team, but probably that team will not be sitting within. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
But the bottom line is content people need to be talking to the SEO people, absolutely.
Can I ask one more existential question? I'm sorry.
You know what, I'm gonna get back to you because I have a lot of questions behind you, but I think you're lovely. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm a copywriter, but I would also argue that I'm doing a lot of the content design on a project specifically right now. And one of the cycles that I'm sure you will be familiar with is sort of the chicken egg of content and design, where often the designer wants the content, but the content person wants to know what's going to fit in the design forever and ever until we all die. So do you have thoughts about, like, when is it okay for, well, I guess it's always okay, but when is it appropriate for the design to lead the content, and when should the content really lead the design? Thoughts on, like, if that's more true in certain industries or whatever, other scenarios?
So I'm gonna let you all in on a little secret, which is that our in-house designer, Sean Tubridy, and I fight about this all the time. He's like, but I need the content. And I'm like, well, I don't know how long the hero should be until you show me what their design is. I mean, it's just gross. It's gross. So what I would suggest is that part of it depends on the kind, are you talking about a website in particular, or products?
In this case, it's like a microsite. Like
Okay.
A single page experience.
Okay, oh, it's a single page experience? Okay, well, so obviously what you need to do is you need to start with purpose, right?
We do have purpose.
You do have purpose.
Yes.
Great, what's the purpose?
It is a foundation sustainable message, so it's an educational / persuasive piece about tobacco and equity.
Okay, so you need to start with the content,
Yes.
right? Like if it's an educational and persuasive piece, then you need to start with the content. And what I would suggest is sit down with the designer and sort of determine, okay, what is the structure of, whether it's the story you want to tell or your messaging architecture, right? Like this is the, when they hit that page, the number one thing that they need to know is this thing, period, right? And make your little box or circle or whatever and just be like, this is what's going to happen here. And then you can even, I mean, honestly what I find, especially if it's something small like a microsite, is just to do a 2-hour kind of pseudo sprint, you know, and like work up on the board and sketch together, right? Rather than like, I need the copy from you by this date. Well, I can't say, you know, I mean, like carve out it's going to save you both a lot of time and energy if you can just sort of like co-create in the moment together. That, I mean, that's ultimately what Sean and I do.
So we've sort of resolved that, and the answer is, I think we all agree that the content should come first in this scenario, but I'm sort of interested in like, if it were a different scenario, when was it more appropriate to have design lead? Like under which purposes does it make more sense for design to lead content?
I mean, I can, you know, if you're an ad agency, for example, and the first thing that, and I'm talking about websites in particular, and the first thing you want people to see when you hit your website is just like this extraordinary video that you did, or like this beautiful design. Then it's like, give me a little tagline, but I really want to see the visuals, for example, right? Or What I really hate is when people are like, it's not about the content, it's about the experience. We're going to make you scroll and do through this, like, screw that, right? So, I mean, it is about, but that's messaging. It's still messaging, right? Like, what's the messaging? We do beautiful visual work. Okay, don't write that in copy, like, show me, for example.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does.
Okay,
Thank
all right,
you.
sure. Who has an, yes?
What roles are you seeing content strategists as the field is maturing, like, grow into in their careers? Like, do you see them taking design leadership positions?
Yes, that is a great question. I am seeing people take, like UX design roles. I'm seeing content strategists who are moving into ops. I am seeing content strategists who are, what else have I seen? I've seen content sort of marketers who really are being granted strategic consultative roles within their teams and organizations, which is really exciting. I think that, I mean, I'm seeing content strategists grow into VP of content strategy, right? Yeah, unfortunately, 90% of the time that means marketing, but we're getting there. Yeah, I mean, it is, again, it's so different across organizations. It was so much easier when we were just talking about websites. It was so much easier. And now it is just, we are just making stuff. We're making so much stuff. I don't even know what all we're making anymore. It's confusing. Yeah, I did a workshop in Seattle and we did a meetup like this, and it was, I mean, there's this many people, but then there was like this weird giant stage, and I was like alone on the stage, and the very first question that came out was like, what do you see as the future role of content strategy and AI and automated content as it relates to something, something Greek, something, something? And I was just like, welcome to Seattle! I have no idea what you're talking about. Next. Yeah. Yeah.
Product content strategy versus website content strategy. What are the big differences?
So the question is product content strategy versus website content strategy. I will say that my views on what product content strategy is have recently and largely been informed by conversations I've had with folks at HubSpot and MailChimp. And so a big thing that I always talk about, any good content strategist works hard to connect the dots, right? Like, we all know that content is touched by an angel. No. That content is touched by technical and leadership and marketing and sales and tech support and tech comm and customer service, right? Like, it all of that stuff swirls around to, like, at some point somehow impact the content that our customers come across in any digital experience, whether it is a website or the product or anything. And a good content strategist has their eye on that journey, right? That both like the journey that the user is taking, but also on the one hand, but also understanding like how the different roles and responsibilities play into the process of getting that content done. And again, I probably just described two different kinds of content strategists. But for website, that is like a free-for-all, right? That is like the kingdom of your organization is all like, give me part of that website and make sure that it is the homepage. And so in that instance, you are really dealing with politics and territorialism and page-level content requirements. You're dealing with content models and content reuse and the technology piece and so on and so forth. On a product, it's really, so you're either at the team level where you're designing and building the thing, or you're really at more like overseeing the customer journey, right? So that you're considering the strategy of what is this person looking for, what are they trying to do, and how do all the different pieces fit together so that the content is consistent and meaningful and on brand and understandable and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Sort of. It is, I just described like 5 different kinds of content strategists, and I apologize. But it really is any time in product content strategy where you see someone looking at multiple parts of the experience, that's what I see as product content strategy. Does that help? Sort of. See, I gotta write that thing. I gotta write that thing. Would somebody else like to write that thing? If somebody else writes that thing, I'll be like, that's the thing! No, I'm getting a lot of no's. All right, are we good?
Can I ask one?
Oh, you're gonna ask a question? Yeah, I think that you can ask a question.
Do I get to ask?
Yes, please do.
Yay.
I have no idea what time it is.
8.
8:06.
Oh, it is. It's 8:06.
Yes.
If you guys have to go, you can. I'm sorry. Okay.
So is this related to time as well? So I know time is not infinite and clients have limited budget.
Nicole. Yes.
Isn't it mind-boggling? But what I'm now struggling with is, as a consultant, clients are like, great, we want you to come in and do this awesome content strategy thing, let's say governance, and we have a budget, and can you just like pop in and like give us some governance and a workflow process and like all these things, and 4 weeks. Also workshop with everyone you can and interview 25 stakeholders. And I'm just curious if you have any tips or advice for how to marry client budget expectations. And like, as content strategists, we obviously love research and we would spend all the time in the world as we could, but we can't. How to marry those two.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would get better at saying no. No, you can't have all that, right?
Yeah.
So I get in trouble because when somebody calls and asks for all of that on a 6-week timeline for $4, right? I start asking. I end up doing kind of half-an-hour free consulting because I don't get any ideas. Because I'm just like, well, why do you think that's what you need? And tell me where this is coming from, and tell me a little bit about the sponsors behind this, and what are their pain points right now? And usually what I can get to is in 4 weeks, somebody promised X, Y, or Z. Somebody promised their boss that they would show them X, Y, or Z, right? And then what I say is, okay, tell me how much money you have. At which point, usually, I'm their therapist, and so they're just like, yes, I do, I only have $4. And then I'm like, can you go get 10? Oh, I don't know, probably. Right? So, but it really does come down to understanding why they're asking for all that crap, because they don't need all that crap. Like, they don't need it, right? They have a pain point. If they only have 4 weeks, they have a specific pain point that needs to be solved, and it's our job to figure out what it is, and then to ask for what we're worth and what the actual value is. And if they don't want to pay us that, then we need to tell them no. And you can tell your boss to call me, and I'll tell her that too.
Pass it on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that is anytime somebody is asking you for all the things. I have a team right now. They work at like a really extraordinary, fancy, famous museum, and they are so well intentioned, and they are working so hard. And they finally got content strategy on the radar of leadership. And what happened is that the board sat down. The board, all of whom are like gajillionaires, and wrote a 7-page digital content strategy, which basically leads with, we want to transform the world of everything in museums everywhere with content. I mean, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. And they have 12 months to do it. And so they're like, can you help us do this? And I'm like, no, but I will come out for 2 days and we will extract like things that they actually want that you can do. So. Yeah, it's a large, cruel world out there, my friends. And I think I'm going to end on that note, right?